Hi everybody, John here. Thanks for joining me for another Allan Holdsworth lesson video. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these, but they're a lot of work, and also my attention has been diverted with other stuff. But I do want to get to all these videos, and today I want to do Sand. Now, you might have seen that I did a little playthrough of Sand on the anniversary of Allan's passing, which was April 15th. It was kind of a last-minute thing, so I figured doing a playthrough wouldn't be as difficult as doing a whole lesson, but I eventually wanted to get to it. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to talk about how to play Sand, or at least how I think Allan plays it. I'm pretty certain, because there's no live footage of Allan actually playing it, only live audio. Also, I want to talk about the history of Sand, how it was written, how the live versions are different, and also some of the sounds that Allan used for it. And if you watch my playthrough video, it's really not that hard of a tune as long as you have a SynthAxe. There's a lot of switching between standard and fifths, like we've seen with other Allan tunes, like Distance vs. Desire, or even the Dominant Plague. But this one switches a bit more. But if you watch my playthrough, you'll see that none of the chords are really that challenging for the left hand, nor the names for any of the chords really that complicated. So it's surprisingly a pretty easy tune for Allan's catalog, if you have that ability to switch between fifths and standard and such like that. Alright, so let's get started. So Sand was first written in 1986, and it actually started off as this little zone piece that Allan would play in his live sets. So when Allan started first using the SynthAxe in February of '86 live, there are some shows, I know there's like one show that's at the end of the tour, where he does a zone improvisation with the SynthAxe, and when he plays his swell chords and does that sort of free improvisation between him and his drummer. But when he went to the U.S. tour in April or the spring of 1986, he did a little bit more of that zone section with the SynthAxe, and he had a part where he played these chords and then did a solo in fifths and then ended that piece with the same chords as like a bookend. That was actually the intro chords to Sand. So that was the genesis of that piece. It was just that chordal section that eventually he fleshed out. The very beginning of the piece on the record actually has some interplay between fifths and standard, where Allan's playing the same shape and switching between fifths and standard. And the roots of that also could be heard a little bit later. Allan did a tour, I think, on the West Coast in July of '86. And you can kind of hear the beginnings of that, where Allan's sort of switching between fifths and standard with the same voicing. So then after that, Allan continued to play those chords. But then Sand was fully written sometime afterwards in '86, because Sand was recorded, I think, in December to about January of '87. So by that time, it was already fleshed out, and they did not play the song live until Steve Hunt joined the band. So in late '86, Allan was playing as a trio, so he didn't have a keyboard player. So this was that infamous time that Chad Wackerman had talked about, where they were playing along to backing tracks, where Allan would play the SynthAxe, and then when it came to his solo, there would be a backing track going on with the chords that Allan had already recorded for the solo, and then he would just live solo over it. So they always Chad had to play with the metronome and everything to keep in time, and he talked about how they hated doing that. But then once Allan toured in Europe, I think in May of '87, they were opening up for Stanley Clarke, or maybe Stanley Clarke was opening up for them. I don't remember. But they were playing with Stanley Clarke, and they had a keyboard player at the time, Steve Hunt. And Allan said, "Hey, can you come and play some of these tunes with us, so I don't have to play to this backing track?" And he agreed. So that's when Sand still wasn't played then, but that's when they first got in contact with Steve. And then a few months later, Allan did a full U.S. tour in '87, and Steve was part of the band, and that's when they started to play Sand live. And the difference is, those intro chords that you hear in the beginning was not played. It started right when the drums came in, and that actually opened up the show for that tour. So they played Sand for that whole tour in '87, but then afterwards it was kind of peppered in once in a while in '88, and I think the last time that they played Sand live was in Japan in '89. It's possible they might have played it later, but I couldn't find any record of that. So it really wasn't played live for that long. And the way that Allan would play it was he took the solo. No one else had soloed, so just like on the record, once the solo kicks in, Allan just did a full solo. So when he was playing the chords, he was only switching between fifths and standard, only for like the main section. So there wasn't that much switching as there is on the record. So what makes it a bit tricky for me is I'm trying to replicate what you hear on the record. And I'm pretty sure that the way that Allan recorded it was Sand uses two different sounds. It uses a bell sound and like a string sound. And I'm not sure if Allan recorded both parts separately or he recorded it once and then applied the sounds afterwards. But when they played it live, Steve Hunt pretty much did all the string stuff and Allan continued to play the bell sounds, and then once it went to a solo, then he switched to his lead sound. So what I'm trying to do is incorporate everything that you're hearing on the record into one part. So some of it's not going to be exactly the way that Allan played it, but that's the way that it's going to sound like, at least most closely to the record. So that's it. That's pretty much the entire history of Sand, and let's talk about now some of the sounds that he used. Sand uses actually a pretty common sound that Allan used in a bunch of other tracks of his. He likes to blend a sharp attack sound with a long drawn out kind of sound, something with a long decay. So for the sharp attack kind of sound, he would use that kind of marimba sound like we heard on Non-Brewed Condiment or Looking Glass, and sometimes electric piano, or this bell sound, which Allan actually uses pretty frequently during this time. And then likes to mix it with a longer drawn out sound, so that might be something like strings or brass or even some sort of like woodwind sound. Later in his career, I think Allan came up with a Yamaha patch that pretty much incorporated both of those, like an electric piano kind of sound with a long decay. But at this point, he was basically combining two different sounds, and again, that's what makes it so hard to play, because I'm trying to do two separate tracks into one. So the bell sound that Allan's using, I'm very, very confident that it's just a regular DX7 tubular bell sound, completely stock. And Allan has used it for other things, and what's nice, I'm using a program called VST Host where I get to use a DX7 VST, which is a virtual synth track, and like an Oberheim, and I can combine them. And also what's nice is I can adjust the volume, because a lot of times Allan would have, like for this song, or this track, the bell sound would be very loud, whereas in other tracks the bell sound would actually be in the background a bit. So, but it's usually there. So he's just using the DX7 tubular bell sound mixed with, I'm pretty sure, just a regular Oberheim string patch. I'm not exactly sure what patch it is, but I'm pretty sure it's an Oberheim, because pretty much Allan used Oberheims in all of his 80s stuff for any of the strings or brass kind of sounds. I think the DX7 is probably used for his lead sound, but I'm not entirely sure. There's really not that much information on it. So those are really the two main sounds. The beginning, opening of Sand, those intro chords, I'm not quite sure if it's a string patch. The voicing that I'm pretty sure that Allan's playing doesn't quite match up to the frequency profile. So there's seems to be some notes there, and that part appears later in Sand. So when I went and double checked, I said, okay, the chords I know are right, but for some reason the notes are not perfect. So that beginning patch could be a little bit different. I'm not sure if it's just a string patch or if Allan's combining it with something else and sort of playing with the voicing a little bit. Some of that stuff is really hard to tell if you don't have the original patch. But I'm pretty sure it's these chords, because it's the same ones that appear later in Sand. That's a little bit about the sounds that Allan used. So let's actually go down to learning it and playing it. Alright, so first we're going to start off with the solo intro piece. And first off, I want to say thank you to my friend Joe Britton, because I believe it was Joe that actually figured this out. He figured out that the beginning part is the same voicing that switches between fifths and standard, which then in turn made us realize that the other part actually has to be in fifths. So Joe, I'm pretty sure, is the one that discovered this, and he's the one that sort of figured out some of the weird tuning stuff. So I always give him credit where credit is due, because I'm just the dummy that does the videos, but I have a lot of help from a lot of talented people, and Joe is absolutely one of them. So thank you, Joe. So the beginning, the little solo part, is this thing where it starts in fifths and it switches between standard with the same voicing. So the first chord is actually an A flat major chord in fifths tuning. So it starts out with an E flat, a C, and an A flat. Also, another note, you might be able to tell that I'm not sure if it's just for this part or it's when Allan plays the full chords and it's just the melody on top. But there's a pitch delay that Allan's using there. Every time the note delays back, it moves up a fifth, moves up a fifth. Let me see if you can hear it. Or if I play maybe a higher note. So that's like sort of buried underneath it. When he played this during those zone improvisations, he wasn't using a pitch delay. This is only on the record. So anyway, that first chord, like I said, is an A flat major triad, and then it switches to standard, and now it becomes a B flat power chord. So I have a B flat, an F, and another B flat. Now what's interesting is that it has to be played on these strings, because if you were to play, let's say, that A flat major triad here, and you switch to standard, you get this chord, which isn't right. So for the way that the notes change from fifths to standard, where you're using the same physical fingering, it has to be played on these three strings. Like that. And then of course it goes back to A flat major to a B flat power chord, and then it finishes on A flat. And then after that, now Allan plays these full chords, and these are the chords that he actually played during those zone improvisational sections. So the first chord here is an F major 7 sus2. And you can think of it as a C major. Again, it's the same voicing that we use for A flat. So now we're in C, so we have a G, C, I'm sorry, G, E, and C with an F in the bass. Like that. So Allan plays that, and then plays the E on the top. And then that shape, and if you watch my video on Allan's compositional techniques, this is another thing that you'll see where he's just taking the same shape and moving it up and down. That's why I think a lot of people put too much emphasis on his theory knowledge instead of just something as simple as, oh, I'm just making a melody with these chords and finding something nice. So here it's an F major 7 sus2. Then that goes to B flat major 7 sus2. And then to E flat major 7 sus2. And then back to F. That. Then this chord gets moved down here, but now instead of the note being on the 6th string, it's on the 5th string, and now we just have a straightforward F major triad. We have F, C, A, and then another F. And then there's an A on top here. Then that moves up a whole step to G major, the B on top. And we get this chord. Seems a little weird, but it's actually an F major add 9 in first inversion, because we have an A, and then we have an F, C, and a G. So it's like an F sus2 with an A in the bass. Then Allan plays this C note, and then it goes down to E minor 7. So we have E, B, G, and then a D. Like that. Then it repeats again. That's the intro, and we'll see those chords a little bit later. Now we're going to start at the main section of the song when the drums enter. So a little note about how the SynthAxe actually works is you can save the tunings and everything you want on the console, as well as the bank changes on the keyboard. So for example, if you have bank 1 as set to a string sound and bank 2 at like a flute sound, if you play bank 1, you'll have the string sound, and then when you switch banks using this plus button on the console, it'll switch to bank 2, and it sends a patch change over to the keyboard to change to a flute sound, so you don't have to do it remotely. And even instead of pressing the buttons on the console, it comes with a foot switch, so you can just do it's just a plus and a minus. That's what's on the console, where you can move forward and backwards in the bank just sequentially. You can put the banks in any order, but you can only move forward and backwards. And that's what Allan would do live to change all of these sounds. The problem is this SynthAxe system doesn't work 100%, so I can't change the banks remotely like that. I could with my other console, because I have the banks set up on my laptop, so if I change to the next bank, it actually would change the sounds on my laptop. But that console stopped working, so this one I have to change manually. I have to actually go to the computer and say, alright, change that sound. And even the foot switch to switch banks doesn't work, so I have to do it manually. That's why in that playthrough video I have those cuts, because I have to actually stop the recording to change the bank on the computer. So now we're at that main section where the drums enter. Now I have this set up a little bit differently from Allan, because I have there's a function on the SynthAxe that allows you to turn left hand dampening off. And what I mean by that is, ordinarily if you played a note and then lifted your finger off the fretboard, it would know that you lifted your finger off and it would stop playing. For this, if I play a note and I lift my finger, it continues to play until I mute it with the strings on the bottom here. So like I said, Allan's using a bell sound and a string sound, so in order to kind of emulate both of those parts being played at the same time, I have to turn left hand dampening off, so when I lift my fingers, those notes continue to ring out. So that's why, even though this is probably the voicing how Allan's playing it, he's actually not doing that with the SynthAxe. He's just playing the bell sound, and Steve, or Allan when he was recording it, was just playing the two notes or whatever it is. And that'll become a little bit more prevalent when we get to the fifth section. Alright, so this part is just in standard, and the beginning has this kind of little jaunty, kind of rhythmic, interesting thing, and I think it's based off of a diminished idea, because the way that Allan views the diminished scale in sort of these like pillars of note. If you watch my really long video about Allan's composition soloing ideas, you'll see how he views the diminished scale. You've got like these minor 7, I think of them as like little pillars, and he's just playing within there. So the beginning part here is this D and E major second interval. Then it goes to a B flat and a B. Now it's a minor second interval because we're on the G and the B string. The tuning's different there. And then that moves down a minor third to a G and an A flat. And that's what Allan's basically playing with. And then it ends on, which is another major second interval. It's just a D and an E. So that's what that part is. It's like a diminished thing with that kind of interesting rhythm. Then after that, Allan actually changes the pinky note to the third finger. So now we have this, it's actually, it sounds more like an E major kind of thing, because we have basically all the notes in E major, E Ionian here. So it starts off with a C sharp minor third, so it's C sharp and E. Then it moves to an A and a B, which is now a major second. And then that moves down a minor third to an F sharp and a G, another major second interval. And that again has that same kind of rhythmic feel to it. And then the last part of it, when Allan was playing that D and the E, now it's a D sharp and an E. So that has all the notes in E major, and you can see how sort of shape-based it is. The first one was just this shape with your first finger and pinky, and then the next one is mostly your first finger and third finger. So that E major part sounds like this. Like that. And you can hear I have all the notes ringing out. And then the next chord is this G dominant 9 chord. G, F, A, and B. But we also have the other E note ringing out on top of it, so it's actually more like a G13, like that. And then while that's ringing out, Allan's playing this, it's hard to tell if he's playing both the E string and the B string, or it's just a B string melody, but I play it as, I keep the E note on the top, but it's E and D, and then C sharp, and then E. So if you pair that melody with the G13, we actually have a Lydian dominant sound, a melodic minor thing, because we have a 13 with the sharp 11. So this is what that whole beginning sounds like. Major section. And then the 13. And the melody. Like that. Now, this is where, like I said, I have to play it a little bit differently, because at this point in his career, Allan is basically playing everything or writing everything with the keys on the top. He sort of only used the strings up here to pluck the chords, really, for a Tabacron, that record. But now, because I have left hand dampening turned off, I have to actually mute the bottom strings, or else they'll continuously ring out. So now I switch to the strings on the bottom here. Where was I? Yeah, I'll do this. Because now I have to mute everything, because the next part, it's just these triads on the top. So Allan's playing F major, moves to G major, so it's moving up a whole step, and now E flat major, moves that whole, up a whole step, back to F, then back down to F, up to G, and then ends on E flat major. So that whole part. And then while this chord is being held out, it switches to fifths tuning. So that's how you can sort of tell where the switch is, because it's the same exact voicing. I think for this section, the fifths is actually tuned up an octave, but it's still the same chord. So now we're going to get to the fifth section. As I just left off, we left off with this D major shape, but now we're in fifths tuning. So the chord name now changes because the pitches are all different. We have an F, we have a C sharp, and then we have a G. So this I would consider like a C sharp add sharp 11, because we have the root, the major third, and then we have the sharp 11. So it's a triad, but it doesn't have a fifth in it. So those are the three notes there. It's a very Allan-y chord. So now we go into this fifth section where it's all basically power chords. And now I have left hand dampening turned off, because I'm going to hold out some of the notes with the keys here. Again, this is not what Allan is doing. I'm trying to combine the string section that's underneath with the bell sound, so I have to find ways around it. So the first part starts out with this B flat power chord, then it goes to C, and it goes to D. And now I'm holding those keys down with my first finger and thumb, and then with my other fingers I'm going to be playing this F power chord to G, and then E flat while that's ringing out. That ending part is pretty cool, because we have a D power chord with an E flat power chord sort of rubbing against each other. Then the second part that we have after that, now Allan's introducing, like this, you can hear there's this little minor second sound, and minor seconds are really hard to play. It's like the 3rd fret and the 9th fret, you know, it's even further than it is on the guitar, because we're in fifths tuning. So it starts off with a B flat power chord, but now I'm playing the octave on the top. And I'm going to hold down that B flat with my second finger, and then continue the power chords on the top. Now you can hear the B flat and the A right next to each other. Oops. And then with my other fingers, again, I'm going to be playing a B flat triad on the top, like that. And then, so it goes from B flat to G, a G power chord, but now this bass part moved up from D to E flat. Now we have an E flat major 7, E flat, B flat, G, and D. You'll see this voicing a couple of times. And then after that, it's B flat, C, and D, but now that octave note is being moved up. Like that. And then again, it's the same thing as the first one. We have F, G, E flat power chord, but then it jumps all the way up to B flat. While that's going on, and then I take my fingers off, and now we play, these power chords on the bottom. C, D, E flat, F, and G. And that altogether sounds like this. While that's ringing out, so here we actually have a B flat power chord with a G power chord, a G and a D, and a B flat and an F, which is a G minor 7, and then we're going to add in the 9, so we have something like this. And then I'm adding in A, the 9. So it actually ends with a full G minor 9 chord. So altogether it should sound like this. Then it switches back to standard, and luckily the standard section is identical. Nothing changes. So here's the standard section again. So that part goes back to fifths, and then from here, the fifth section is almost identical, just the ending is different to get into the solo. As I just said, the fifth section is going to be identical, so I'll play through it until it changes. So now here it goes back to E flat power chord, but now Allan plays a B power chord on the bottom. So now it's actually a B major 7. So it sounds like this. And then now it goes to those intro chords that we just did, but now instead of it being played in F, it's now a whole step down to E flat. So E flat major 7 sus2. A flat major 7 sus2, D flat major 7 sus2, back to E flat major 7 sus2, and then again it's an E flat major chord, and then it switches to the solo. So that's that entire head part. Now we'll talk about the solo chords. What's interesting about the solo chord section is up until this point, the standard and fifths parts that we just did uses the same sound. All the same sounds are in the same octave and everything. But once we get to this part with the solo chords in standard, because it also switches to fifths, for whatever reason Allan switches the bell sound up an octave. So I have to actually go and change to a different patch, because now I have to say, put the bell sound up an octave, because the string sound is still in the same octave. So that's a little unusual why Allan did that. Maybe it just sounds a little bit nicer, but I actually have to change that. And once it goes to the fifth, it's actually the same as the head section mixture. So the first chord that we have here is regular G major, and we've seen this voicing plenty of times before already. Like what Allan does in Metal Fatigue or Unmerry Go Round. We have a G major triad. It's G, G, B, and D. And then we have another B on the top. So it's a G major, and that moves to C major 7. And again, we're using that same sort of triad voicing where this is now C major, so C, E, G, and then we have a B on the top, the major 7. Then from here, we're actually playing regular major chords, F major, G major. Then it goes to this, which you can think of as an F major add 9 in first inversion, or an A minor 7 sharp 5. And that moves up a whole step, so now we have a B minor 7 sharp 5, or a G major add 9 in first inversion. Now the second half of that, now it goes to C minor, with C, E flat, and G, with an E flat on the top. Again, we've seen this voicing before. And then it goes to a G major 7. Same voicing that we just saw before, but now it's G major 7. So we have a G, B, and D with an F sharp. And then that now takes the F part that we have and now moves it down to C. So then it's C major, D major, E minor 7 sharp 5, or C major add 9 in first inversion. F sharp minor 7 sharp 5, or D major add 9 in first inversion. And that's it, and then it repeats. Like that. And what's interesting is the way that the solo is structured is that repeats 4 times, then it does the next section in fifths. Then the last time, that part in standard is 3 times, not 4. And then it does the fifths part, and then it goes into the outro. So for whatever reason, Allan removes one of the repeats there. But it's that standard section 4 times. And also, Allan could probably, this is like something that Allan would do a lot for these major chords. Instead of playing the F on the A string, you can also put the 5th on the bottom here and play C. These are all Allan things that he would do. Or what you can do is you can play F and then move the triad up and still keep the F in the bass. So this is like a G7 in 7th inversion. You're just moving F to G while keeping F there. Or you can play an F major and put the 9 in the bass and move that up a whole step. So you have F major add 9, G major add 9, but the 9's in the bass. These are all Allan-y things. I'm not exactly sure what he does on the record. I think the major chords sound the best, but I think once in a while he'll like throw that in there. And then of course you can do the same thing down here. I actually think that the major chords sound the best. So that's that solo part in the solo chords in standard. Now it switches to fifths after this. Goes into a 5th section. So again, we're using the same mixture of the octaves that we did in the head section for fifths. So now this whole thing is actually transposed down a whole step. So instead of starting in B flat, we're now in A flat. And it's basically just a variation of that section. Some of the same ideas are there. So it starts off A flat, B flat, C, and then the E flat power chord on the top. That makes it a C minor 7 sound, because we have a C power chord and an E flat power chord. C, G, E flat, B flat. Then it does the same thing we did with the minor second interval in A flat. So I'm gonna use my second finger to hold this A flat down, and then Allan plays an E flat, the E flat major 7 chord up here. So we have the E flat power chord on the bottom and the G power chord on the top. Then again, we're going to play the same thing, but now we're going to move the octave up with the power chord. Then from here it goes to C sharp major 7. So we have that C sharp with the F power chord on the top. So C sharp, G sharp, F, and C. And that's that whole section. What's interesting is when Allan is soloing over this, he treats that entire section basically as F Dorian, because it's all diatonic until the last chord, this C sharp major 7. I haven't found any record where Allan actually addresses that change. So maybe he does, and I just haven't heard it yet. But for whatever reason, he almost treats that entire section as F Dorian or as part of E flat major, even when it gets to that chord. So then after that, we go back into the solo chords, but in standard. And now remember, it repeats 3 times. All right, I'll play through it 3 times. And now for the final 5th section of the tune. So this part repeats identically again to the other 5th section in the solo, except now we're going to play this until the end of the song, because Allan continues with the 5th tuning. So, like I said, it's identical up until this point. So then after that, Allan goes back into those head chords starting on F. So F major 7 sus 2, B flat major 7 sus 2, E flat, F, then continues with the F major, G major, F major add 9 in first inversion, E minor 7. Then goes back and now plays the part transposed down a whole step in E flat, A flat, whoops, E flat, A flat, D flat, E flat major, then moves it up to F major, which we didn't do before, then it ends on this. This is just an E flat power chord. Now, the SynthAxe has a feature on the, there's another foot switch. It's actually houses all the electronics for the power and everything, the transformer, where it has a function called hold and capo and stuff. And I think at this point, what I do, and I'm pretty sure what Allan would do, is that after you play this and you press on that hold button, it'll hold out these notes indefinitely, even until you actually play something differently. So the pedal's all the way back there, so I can't really reach it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my 4 fingers and hold it down. So it goes like that. And the reason why is because while these notes are being played out, Allan plays A flat, B flat, and then C, and then again puts the 9 in there, very similar to what we saw earlier in the piece. So let me show you how that whole thing sounds. And now with the power chords, A flat, B flat, C. So it's a C minor 7 now, and then C minor 9. You do something like that with the bar, very cool. But yeah, that's how that piece ends. So that's Sand. Now I'm going to show you the little playthrough that I did. The only thing was I forgot to add the little octave part during the 5th section. I don't know why, just, you know, I completely forgot it. But at least that's what I think is going on in the record first. And so if you watch my playthrough, maybe you don't have to watch this again, or if it's new to you, enjoy it. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.